Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Finding Your Influence, a bunch of random and exciting conversations about figuring out, where your influence is. And if you're joining this conversation, you may have influence already because you're likely a founder or part of the founding team in a company, more likely a tech company, or any company's not tech anymore anyway. And today we're talking about when you're a founder, you start out with this great momentum. You've got this great energy and you're able to sell and you're not sleeping. And you've got this great team that you're really excited about, but you've got too many balls in the air. And eventually, if you're selling well enough, it's impossible to carry them all, to catch them all. You start losing some things. And some of those things may be leads. They may be potential clients. They may be, supporting current clients. All very important things. And we know you want to keep those current clients and you want to turn those current clients into brand advocates, etc. So eventually you have to give up a bit of the control, not all the control. You definitely need a sales team. You need other people to support the company because your job as founder and the founding team is to make sure your team is a success. So you need to make sure you're hiring the right people, you're supporting the right company culture. You're probably working on making your funders happy. There's a lot going on. So what are those steps, especially if you're looking to expand past that home market, past your network, your founders network, friends, family, your network, the people that you're shaking hands with and that you've known for a while that I don't want to say easy sells, but easier. So what are the next steps? So that's what we're talking about today. So thank you all for joining. We have sets of questions as always. If you want to ask any questions, please do make use of the chat if you're joining us live. And thank you if you are joining us in the recording later. You can always connect with myself. We have Greg, we have Rick. We are all active LinkedIn users, so feel free to reach out on there. And I welcome your questions and feel free to message if you want to share about your company or where you're calling in from, etc. for those of us that are joining us live. And good luck to the work you're trying to do while joining us live, because that is the world we live in now, multitasking. So I'm Jen Riggins. I'm your host. Rick, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Sure. My name is Rick Pizzoli. I'm the CEO of Salesforce Europe. We're the leading business development team for tech, expanding either within Europe or to Europe. We offer sales consulting, lead generation, and sales outsourcing. Since 2003, we've helped about 400 technology companies expand within the region. So we've got quite a bit of experience that we're happy to share today.
And Greg, please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Rick. My name is Greg Dunne. I'm the co-founder and co-managing partner of SFE Partners, which is Salesforce Effectiveness Partners. We're a boutique sales consulting firm that helps organizations increase company valuation by helping them scale and grow their sales organizations and professionalizing those sales organizations with the tools, people, and technology that's necessary to be able to rapidly grow in this environment.
So definitely both of you are American, both of you around the same age, similar backgrounds, but different, and similar target audiences in very different countries or continents even. So that's very interesting. Something when we were formulating the questions last week, Greg, you had said that I hadn't heard this term before, which is founder syndrome. So I wanted to let you define that for us. Respectfully.
Well, I'm sure I'm going to end up offending founders along the way, and I'm sure I'm going to end up offending sales professionals along the way. So at least I'll be equal opportunity in those two things. So founder syndrome means different things to different people, and there have actually been books written, and I have my own definition of founder syndrome, having run worldwide sales for 5 founder-led startups before I actually went into the consulting business. And my version of founder syndrome is the misplaced and somewhat irrational belief that a founder's job is to replicate themselves when they're building out their sales organization. Many times, founders build a company, they have deep networks, they have deep subject matter expertise. They've done a really good job evaluating a need in the market for their products and services. And so they're uniquely qualified to be able to convert the masses to believe what they believe. Unfortunately, what they find over time is that doesn't always scale. And what has to happen is there needs to be training and enablement programs. There needs to be messaging. There needs to be simplification that allows just regular salespeople to be able to go out into the world, find qualified opportunities, ensure that those qualified opportunities are the right opportunities for the organization, and then go out and close and scale. And there's a disconnect there between a founder's desire for really high conversion rates, which is anything that comes into the top of the funnel, I can close because I'm the founder and I'm really smart and I invented the product or deliver the service, versus okay, we're going to get lots of things into the top of the funnel. We're going to sacrifice being able to close a really high percentage of those things, and we're going to compensate for that sacrifice by building scale.
Mm-hmm. So how do you convince a founder that they are ready to move past that point of what can only be described as burnout, I would say? And how does it usually work out with the first sales leader? What are the expectations of that first sales leader then, Greg, if the CEO or founder believes they are the greatest sales leader of all time?
Well, there's no easy answer to that, Jen. There's two kinds of reasons that a sales professional gets brought in to be able to support the founder and scale sales. One is their board or other people that they respect or trust is twisting their arm and forcing them to go out and get somebody who can, quote unquote, take the burden of sales off of their plate and scale the organization. And oftentimes that's in direct conflict with what the founder wants or the founder believes. And so, there's a lot of tricky questions to be able to ask as the first sales leader before you accept a job when the founder isn't actually ready to let go of sales. And from the salesperson's perspective, that can create some unique challenges. In other cases, the founder is actually ready to build and scale sales. But the biggest sale, that I always had as the head of sales for a founder-led company was internal. I was always selling the founder on introducing, the things, the tools, the marketing, the programs that would be necessary for a professional sales organization to be successful, versus the way the founder always did it, which was the brute force method of working the network, finding, a smaller number of very large deals and building the company based on, those early wins.
Mm-hmm. Rick, what other challenges have you seen when this happens, this founder syndrome, as I've learned?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with what Greg was saying. Thank you, Greg. That it's, that first step is a big step. And typically people do wait too long. Founders wait too long, and they find that they become the bottleneck in closing the deals and scaling the company. So it's important to time that right, because it does take time to create the plan, to document how you're going to grow. And then once you've documented and have a good plan to grow, that you hire the right people and build the right team. And we often find that people, once they typically don't plan, so they wait too long, and then they're forced to do it, and they say, okay, I'm going to do it. So they just kind of launch into it without planning. And they typically hire too senior too fast. So the first person comes in might be a GM or VP of sales or a CRO. And then they say, okay, well, we've built $1 million in organic growth for the founder. Now we're bringing a CRO. You're responsible for $1 million in growth. So $2 million that year, without considering, well, it's taken us maybe 3 or 4 years to build that first $1 million. And how's that CRO now going to build that second $1 million, right? So how many leads does that take? How big does that pipeline have to be? That CRO is probably not going to be picking up the phone and cold calling themselves. So they want to build their own team. So we say, if you build a CRO, you hire a CRO first. He's a CRO of what? You don't have anybody to manage, and they're probably going to want to then build their own team, and their own team may or may not be the right structure for the kind of company that you need, for the kinds of clients that you have. So we typically say, look at the kind of business and the planning, look at the kind of business that you're building, look at the size of the customers that you're signing, and really build that pipeline growth first. So look at the digital marketing you need to build, look at the lead generation, look at who's going to be closing those deals, making sure that engine structure is there first, and you're putting those right people in the place of that structure. And so for sales, for example, if you have an ACV of 20,000 a year. A salesperson who's focusing on 20,000 a year is going to be different from somebody from 100,000 a year or $1 million a year. So when you're interviewing those people and you have the sales planning and you know the types of deals that you want to close and you know the verticals that you want to close into, you're selling into, then you know the profile of the people that you need to bring on. If you know the revenue targets that you want to hit, you know how many deals you need to close. And if you're closing maybe 4 to 1 out of 4 deals, you know how big the pipeline has to be. And if you're, maybe one out of every 3 or 4 leads gives you an opportunity, you know how many leads you have to build. So it's really important that you have clear revenue targets, the planning, and then build the team around that structure. Don't just hire a great CRO and say, okay, go ahead and build it because maybe they built it once or twice before in their career. Doesn't mean that they know how to build it for you. So those are a few of the kind of the pitfalls that we come across.
How often are you finding CEOs have this in place, these systems in place before they go hiring or trying to do it all themselves?
Well, nobody has in place, and it's because they've never done it before. And, they've maybe launched a company or 2 or 3 before. But every company is different. That sales structure is different. Technology stacks change dramatically every year, and the right tech stack that's going to fit you before is going to be different from now. Digital marketing is going to be different. So all that requires a lot of expertise, and few people have that in-house. So somebody who can build those plans is going to be different than somebody who can deliver on those plans.
Mm-hmm. And I guess this leads to high turnover in early sales staff because they're burnt out. And
we see, most first hires, second hires will fail, and that can put you off a whole year in your home market or a whole year in a new market. I think, Greg, you've got some experience with that.
Yeah, the reason, too much on both sides. The reason they fail isn't that you get a wonderful sales professional in and they forget how to sell when they get to your organization, right? Sometimes they fail because of misperception in product market fit. Sometimes they fail to, properly identify their ideal customer profile. They're going to the wrong. That can be challenging. And there's an undercurrent of tension that always exists between the early salespeople and the founder. And that has to do with a lot of misperceptions from the founder about how those early deals actually happened, right? How many times have we heard from the founder, hey, we have a sales cycle that's, 30 days, right? When the sales cycle is a year, right? And their perception of the sales cycle is 30 days is, they got the product ready. They've had somebody, a customer sitting at their side for a period of time. And from the time they asked for the order, they might have gotten it, maybe 30 or 60 days later. They don't count the true sales cycle, which is from first contact, right? And so they don't think about all the time they spent nurturing and, and mining their network and dealing with the relationship side of things in order to be able to introduce their products and services. So there's almost always a fairly massive disconnect between the actual sales cycle and the perception of the sales cycle from the founder. Just like there's a misperception about, the conversion rate. The founder will say things like I talked about earlier, high conversion rate. And when I find a deal, I can close them at least, more than 50% of the time, right? Well, that's not how pipeline management works. I've never seen a pipeline where the funnel level started at 50%, right, for close rate. But, the founder kind of forgets about all the conversations they had where people said they weren't interested and focuses on the ones where, there was an actual need. And so in their mind, there's a massively high conversion rate, right? Founders will say things like, there's not a pushback on price. We've nailed price, right? Well, it's different the way a price negotiation works with the decision maker, the person who is actually working with someone and can make whatever moves with pricing that they want to make versus, trained sales professionals who are taught, how to sell value and, and how to not move significantly from the price points that are, have been established by the organization. So there's a lot of undercurrent there where, founders misremember what happened that led to the early deals, and that the salesperson, the first and second salesperson in, has sometimes a difficult job re-educating.
Absolutely. So then with all this in mind, Rick, how do you then build and manage teams to deliver on that growth strategy once you've started building, if you actually have a strategy, which I guess is the first step?
Well, I think Greg mentioned on it, the product market fit. So you could be a founder and you've closed 20 deals in different markets. You've gone through that discovery phase. And then if you want to scale, you can't scale in every vertical that you've sold to, right? You need to do a bit of analysis and you need to see, where is my product market fit? Where is there what does a product satisfy the strongest market demand that's a sizable market that we can grow into? And out of those 20 customers, it might be 10 or 8 of those customers say, okay, this is where we really have our best product market fit. Let's build the company around this, our messaging around this, the product around this. And then from there, you can say, okay, how do the companies look like within that product market fit? And that's your ideal customer profile that you're going to build your digital marketing around, your lead generation around, let's say outbound lead generation, your sales, your messaging. If you're doing outbound messaging, what are the email templates? What are the LinkedIn? What's the content you're pushing out of the market? So there's a lot of activity on building the brand and targeting that particular sector to grow the business. And that's really the only way you're going to be able to scale. If you're just trying to sell to everybody all the time, nobody can market to everybody. Nobody can build a team to sell to everybody. You have to go through that process of how you're going to go after those, that ideal customer profile, and then the job titles within that, within those ideal customer profiles.
But that's got to be hard, because don't you feel like the fruit, there's so much low-hanging fruit. We don't want to eliminate customers so early on. We may be missing a market our competitors have gone against. Is that not an argument you get a lot, that I have many ideal customer profiles?
It's hard for us all. It's hard for Greg and I when companies come to us and they say, we want to do this, or we want this vertical, or we have this budget. And we realize, it's not, for me anyway, coming to Europe. And it's hard to say, listen, you're not ready for Europe yet, or you don't have the budget for it, or you don't have the base of clients. Maybe they said, on our home market, we really struggle to sell because X, Y, Z. And now we want to go into a new country. Say, listen, you can't go into a new country unless you've established yourself in your home market, or you need budget to do it, or you can't rely on a commission-only model to do it. You need to have investment from somewhere to do it, or you haven't defined who you want to sell to, or the messages are too fluffy. So there's a lot of questioning that we go through our clients even before we take them on, saying, are you ready or not? Do you have that plan for growth? And they have to go through that maturity process if they're going to scale.
They have to mature. All these often young founders.
And if you show me a successful high growth startup or post startup founder-led company, I'm going to show you multiple pivots. And there's kind of a tension that exists within those companies, and mining what you already know in the places where you already know you can mine, and increasing your total available market for the purposes of increasing the valuation of the company, right? So a lot of what happens in early sales is experimentation, right? Okay, I have successfully sold into healthcare, and here's what my ICP looks like in the healthcare market. Check. Now, do you focus entirely on healthcare and build the company that way? Or do you say, okay, how does this look in financial services? Let's go try to build some ICPs and go after finance and check. The more you can learn early on, and the more listening you do to the broad markets, the greater the increase in the valuation of the company. And obviously there's fundraising, there's fundraising that people have in mind. There's, there's overall value, there's partnerships and strategies. And so, there's no right answer, but different founders and different boards of earlier stage companies will have a different viewpoint on, okay, do I focus, or do I, purposefully not focus, in order to be able to understand what all of the available market might look like for me as I build out my sales organization. There's one more quick point I want to make. There's also a kind of disconnect there between the kind of salespeople that tend to get hired early on in startup companies. So a lot of times people will be looking for bargains. So they tend to hire less experienced salespeople early at a time when you actually need the most experienced salespeople doing their job, because more experienced salespeople mean they listen more. and they connect better with the executive, teams of the customers that they're trying to sell into. And so often they'll try to get discount pricing for high value jobs. And that's where Rick and I sometimes have a lot of work to do to convince them that, there's an investment and a return in sales, and, don't start playing the game of, let's make a deal when it comes to hiring salespeople. Get the best people in early on. That's when you really need them. You can actually dilute the talent pool later on if you need to, right? Because that's just how sales works. But early on, get your best people with market knowledge into those positions so that they can actually listen to the customers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think in particular, it's a very unique profile because you're not looking for a heavy hitter from Salesforce.com. You're not taking somebody with a big brand and a big structure and a whole pipeline behind them who's been able to close these deals at the front. They will probably fail put in that sales leadership role or even a sales role on a scale up. You need somebody probably who came from one of those companies, has that experience, has that training, but have cut their teeth in 1, 2, 3 startups where there was no brand, there were no processes, there were maybe early sales plannings that they need to work with the management and develop. So they need to go out in the market, build that brand on their own reputation and their own confidence, build a brand of the company that, yes, it's a trusted company. Here's the story behind them. Here's this, innovative technology that, and the USPs behind it, and take them down the path to closure. So it's somebody who understands, who can build a brand, has enough business skills, has enough technical skills, has enough closing skills to be able to build that business. And those are unique people. And like Greg said, you need to pay for them. You can't promise, wow, but if you sell $1 million, you get so much commission. Well, great. There's more risk on, in a small company being able to do those big deals than a big company. So those are really, there's not a lot of value on that promise in the future. So you need to, probably some equity, good fixed fees, salaries, and good bonus for growth.
And it's probably not in the typical founders network, which a lot of times, I have this outgoing person that I went to uni with that I do the tech side. They're really outgoing. They recruited for our frat, so I know they're really good. It's probably not that personality.
I mean, it could be, but what we also find is the founder will find that person and then build the role around the person, as opposed to defining what that role should be and the different people in those roles, and then make sure you have the right people. So, they don't do it backwards. Build the structure right. And if you don't have experience in building that structure, bring in a consultant to help you build that structure, and then bring in the right people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big part of the strategy that we look at when we're talking to these types of companies is what I'll ask a founder to do is show me his business plan, right? And then instead of trying to build a sales organization that gets you through columns, A and B, I go to column AZ7, right? And I look at what things are going to look like 5 years from now, and we start to piece together what the sales infrastructure is going to need to be able to support the revenue stream 5 years down the line. And then it doesn't mean you start building that because nobody could afford it and it would be a bad idea, but it does start meaning that you do things that are not disruptive to what the org would look like when you get out that far. So if everything goes right, you don't want to have an organizational structure that can't morph into the structure that you're actually going to need over time. That can be incredibly disruptive. It leads to people coming and going, and reputational damage to the organization from a sales perspective. And so you build out the organization as far to the right of the business plan as you possibly can, and then you start tactically implementing that way over here with the budget that you have right now to get the things done that you need to get done to be able to hit your numbers in year 1 and year 2.
Okay.
And then when you have that view, and okay, there's an SDR, there's a support role, right? There's an SDR role, there's a BDR role, there's an inside sales role, there's a BDR manager role, there's an enterprise sales. The next step in the career path with people inside the company as well, and you can articulate that to your team, and that creates less churn on your base, because right now BDRs is famous to last less than a year. But if you give them that structure and that visibility where they're going next in the career, and more responsibility, more money, part of the team, et cetera, when you have that visibility, then the team sticks together, and it's easier also to promote people earlier through the organization, and keep them around.
So both of y'all obviously work for outsourcing companies, so it would be a logical next step to ask because you're talking about a lot of permanence. But Greg, when is it better to work with an outsourcing team, especially at the stage we're talking about, like when you're making that push past founder-led sales? When is it appropriate or when is it not? And what should you be outsourcing or not in that role?
So there's a few times where the opportunistic use of outsourcing really makes sense for organizations. One is during the build phase, right? So say you want to build a channel program, right? And so you decide you're going to bring in a world-class manager of the channel. There's a difference between building a program and running the program. So if you hire for the purpose of building the program, then you bring in somebody who's really wonderful at building the program, and then they build it, and then what? Right? So if you use outsourcing to actually build the program, and then you bring in a world-class leader of the channel to be able to run the program, they'll have input and they'll make some changes and some tweaks, but you're not hiring to the wrong skill set, which is you're not hiring to the thing that you only need done once when you actually want somebody who's there to be able to drive it indefinitely. So in the build phase, we recommend using consultants and outsource providers to be able to get them through at least the basics of what needs to be done to build a program or to build a system or to build a process or, or to build an inside sales organization so that they can then hire the people to run it. The second piece of it is fractional, right? So as you build a sales organization, as Rick was alluding, sales is an individual sport. It's a team sport, and there's all kinds of different skill sets that go into building a sales organization. Hunters have different skill sets than farmers. Farmers, there's channel, there's government, there's international. Depending on where you are, that means different things. There's all kinds of different people that you need. You may not need full bodies early on in the life cycle, and so in cases where you need fractional help from somebody who's providing a service into the sales function, it makes all the sense in the world to be able to use outsourcing to be able to pay fractionally for that full-time service or for that service. And then finally, there's the experimentation phase. And so what we tell people, for instance, in lead gen, it's our goal is for you to backfill and have permanent resources in your lead gen team. But if you're doing lead gen in an area that you're not sure it's going to work, then use outsourcing to be able to help you through that. So you're not disrupting the organization. You're not pulling, inside salespeople off of something that is working and asking them to try something that you're not sure will work. You're not, kind of disrupting the organizational structure. So you can have kind of these pods of people that can experiment in market segments that may represent increasing, total addressable market for you. And then, as you start to see success or as you start to see failure, you can make decisions about which of those actually belong as permanent functions within your organization and, and which of them, don't.
Yeah, I would agree with those points. I think kind of a rule of thumb is, any critical activity that has to be done once, leave it to bring in an expert to do that, because these experts probably have done it 100 times, where somebody who's managing it may have done it once or twice, 3, 5 times in their career. And that could be a sale or even your business plan at the beginning. It could be your go-to-market plan, your sales playbook. It could be the partner program, as Greg said. I mean, we probably 90% of the companies that we work with that have a partner strategy don't have a good partner plan. It's, we give a discount and this is what they can sell, but it's not really a well thought out, detailed partner program on why partners should work with us, what extra value, how they can make the product extra sticky, what kind of partner should we really try to sign, what's a good partner, a bad partner, what kind of commitment should we get from them. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to go into a partner program that is not obvious to most companies. And so, few of those are well thought out when we engage with customers, and then we kind of build it on the fly. I mean, we can build it up front, but if they want us to just start selling, go out there and do it. So you're kind of building it and learning on the fly, and that's really that's not the most efficient use of salespeople's time and time in the market when you don't have that well thought out. So tech stack build, how to define the technology that you should use. The data, what third-party data resources, how do we build that data for the company? Is that ongoing basis? How to do it in North America? How to do it in Europe? Everything needs to be, GDPR compliant, so we're not doing anything illegal. Your whole international expansion. So, you have your ideal customer profile in North America. How do you translate that to Europe? And then what countries do you go into in Europe? Which verticals do you go to? How do you build that team in Europe? All that. The planning for that can be outsourced, and then the actual teams can be outsourced. Maybe you outsource everything, or maybe you only outsource, as Greg said, the lead generation, because you need to bring people on, you need to have the languages, you need to have the managers, you need to have the localized content. So there's a lot of experience and thought process that needs to go in to get that right. And then, sure, eventually, once you're up and running, some of that can be brought back into the core company. But what level? Do you want that digital marketing inside the company, or is it better to have a third party? Do you want the lead generation outbound, inside the company in your home market, or outside, international or inside? So all those can change over time. We find that sometimes people bring us in to replace an in-house team that didn't work. And other companies, they bring us in, they start building their own team, bring them up to the level, so they're working at the same level as us, and then we transition our team over to the client as well. So we see all elements of that.
How often are these organizations, do they know what they want, or do they assume that they have this money, they want to spend it to hire in-house people right away?
Typically, when we start talking to people about the international step, people don't have really a plan. They probably don't even have a revenue number that they're working to. They're kind of, well, I don't know how to do it. I've heard about outsourcing companies. Let me see proposals and see what they have to say. And so sometimes we're kind of shooting a bit in the dark, because they're not saying, I want to hit $1 million in revenue and I've got 500,000 to spend, or 100,000 to spend, or they're not giving us the content, the numbers, the metrics that we need. So we need to ask detailed questions. Okay, let's look at your home market. So your home market, you did $1 million, and your pipeline was $4 million, and your average contract value is 100,000. So we're going to need 40 clients in the pipeline, and probably maybe 200 leads to get the 40 in the pipeline to get the 10 deals closed. And so if you want $1 million in Europe, we need to map that out again. So and what's the cost of a BDR person in the US, and how many leads they're producing a month, and a salesperson. So if you really want $1 million in revenue, this is what the team looks like. And there's a sales cycle, right? So there's a sales cycle to engage the market, to get the leads coming in. So a pipeline, ramp period. And then once you have that first call, then there's a sales cycle. So there'll be a 3 to 6 month lag between when you hit the market and those first deals start coming in. So we try to kind of build that growth process with the clients. But I mean, few people have that documented or well thought out, or really an opinion whether they're going to do it one way or the other. At least when they come to us, they're kind of seeing what is out there and how they should build it.
Your experience?
Yeah, a lot of our clients are private equity firms or venture capital firms that put us into, quote unquote, professionalize the sales organization. And one of the first questions I ask when there's professional money behind the company is, what percentage of your annual budget do you have allocated, as a percentage of top line revenue, what percentage do you have allocated to cost of sales and marketing? And I include sales and marketing together these days, because to separate them is foolishness. Sales and marketing are no longer separate organizations. They're totally interdependent, interconnected pieces of the sales puzzle. And so in a high growth company, my expectation would be that, on the low end, it's, maybe 12%, maybe up to 15%. And on the high end, closer to 20% of, what they're planning on bringing in from a revenue perspective is being allocated to what they're going to spend on sales and marketing. And so if there's a massive disconnect in what they're willing to spend to get the result, then, that's a total red flag. And, we kind of have to resync. And then once we have some dollar figures in mind, so they want to do $5 million in revenue, they're going to allocate 20%. So they have $1 million in sales and marketing. Okay, now how do we allocate that $1 million, right? Where do we put those buckets? And we take kind of a granular approach to helping them think through from almost a budgeting perspective, where the spend's going to be in order to be able to help them accomplish their goals. And then, once we've nailed that down, we can start talking about, the use of outsourcing versus, hiring people in-house, et cetera, and making sure. But, the biggest disconnect that I see and the biggest reason I go running from a client is, they're expecting significant top line growth, but they're not, they don't have the budget planned to be able to actually either get there or sustain that growth once they do get there.
Okay. And that seems to be a theme that they need.
Planning. I mean, SaaS companies, it's closer to 30%. I mean, there's software development, and then there's a huge sales and marketing engine to be able to build that brand and scale that business. And there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of SaaS companies out there, targeting the same verticals, calling on the same people. So how are you going to raise above the noise and get her to be able to close those deals? It costs money in building the brand on the digital marketing, on Google ad spend, on LinkedIn spend, on pushing content out there, on outbound BDRs and getting the leads in and converting those leads and selling. So that all has a cost, and there's all an engine behind it to be able to hit those numbers.
Yeah. And Rick, how often do you see a lot of the decisions made? So you talk about the tech stack, so we'll use that as an example. A lot of the decisions that are made on the tech stack are made, based on the personal experiences of a few number of people inside the organization, right? So there's not an ability, so you said you've helped 400 companies. We've helped 300 companies. So we have teams of people inside our organization that do nothing but scour the land for new sales and marketing tools that are going to be appropriate for our clients, right? And so, somebody that used a specific CRM in the past, somebody that's used, data sources, we're seeing new and innovative things coming out, all of the time, and so where there's not a one size fits all based on the personality or the experiences of the people inside the organization. And, part of our job as they're allocating those dollars into sales and marketing is to making sure that they're not overspending. Not every company in the world needs Salesforce.com, sorry, Salesforce, but, so that they're not overspending in areas because, people in their previous jobs had experiences with big, bulky, technology components that they're trying to shoehorn into a startup or an earlier stage organization. It doesn't always work. And so that's an important component as they're considering is where can they save by applying new and innovative technologies and reapply into other things that they want to spend money on that'll help increase top line growth.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I have a client right now that has a great product and they're like, yeah, we're ready to PR, go out there, advertise and everything. I'm like, you don't have a CRM or a way to follow up yet. Yes, I'm a marketer, so I can still do my job. It's just there will be no way to measure the effectiveness of my job if you don't have those in place. Rick, what are some of the bare minimum essentials and how do you build that tool stack that you find, or what would you require or hope that someone would have before you make the step to partner with them?
Yeah, well, I would agree with Greg that needs to be well thought out. And you don't need to buy the most expensive solutions out there, but you don't want to go cheap either. So, I think even my own business, when I started, I should have invested more in a better web site and content up front and messaging up front. I should have done more planning up front. I should have put a better CRM or a better deployment, more well thought out, managing the stages of the CRM earlier. And we do see that with our clients that, Greg's exactly right. They use what's familiar with them without taking a step back and really analyzing the business and really what do I need for this business, and what they need for their core business might be slightly different than they need for lead generation. Because, for example, lead generation today, let's say a high touch, high outbound approach, 100 contacts a day, multi-channel approach, calling, email, LinkedIn, pulling third-party data sources in. reporting back on the activity level. So, how many of those multi-channel touch points are we making? What are the conversion ratios of each? And am I hitting my numbers to be able to build a pipeline to get the revenue at the end of the day? Most CRMs can't do that. So maybe the CRM that you build, internal, external, or the platform you use for your lead generation might be different than you're using for the rest of your business because it's not giving you that reporting. So I think the point we're saying is whatever that platform is, it should be fit for purpose for the use that you're using it for, and not just try to do everything with something or try to repurpose something that is not fit for what you're trying to do.
That happens a lot too. Like, I have a lot of clients that build their own website. And please stop building your own website. No one else can edit it but the one person. If that one person leaves, you're screwed because you can't update your website. Just use a CMS. Please, for the love of God, use a CMS so even a technical me, can update the blog and the website. It's much more efficient than things like that. Or open source. Open source. They love the idea of open source, and I'm very pro open source, but open source is not actually free. What you get for free is a certain thing, and it usually needs a lot of customization and expertise. So don't always go for that either.
Yeah.
So y'all are both about expanding, helping companies expand new verticals and markets. Greg is more for selling into the US versus Rick for selling into the several European markets. How does this expansion kick off? I think Greg's yours may be a bit more straightforward, so I'm going to let you go first.
Can you? I guess I don't totally understand the question, Jen. Can you help me a little bit?
How do you work with other companies when they're deciding if they want to go to another vertical or if they want to expand to different parts of the US? Things like that.
So I mean, we work kind of in two different ways with our clients. One is at the board level and one is at the head of sales level, right? At the board level, we tend to be involved with, again, the investor team to help them think through the sales activities that are going to be necessary for them to hit their goals. And those goals may include fundraising. They may include exit, M&A activity. They may include, acquiring, other companies. There's all kinds of motivations in the boardroom that don't always filter their way down to the sales lead in a particular organization that kind of helps you translate what's necessary, in those particular areas to help the salesperson execute against a plan that may have an ulterior motive, relating to M&A, exit, investment, et cetera. And so we kind of provide that translation layer to make sure that the sales planning is in lockstep with what the investors are, prioritizing in terms of where they want to bring the particular organization. More important than that, I think, is actually helping the sales leads on the ground separate the single person. We're going to scale this organization by hiring a bunch of generalists and distributing them, regionally, and asking them to all to do the same thing, and may the best person win, versus building, sales teams that demonstrate the capacity of inbound marketing programs to provide leads, of lead tracking and pipeline and pipeline development activities to be able to increase close rates and drive deals. And so there's kind of two areas. That translation area is really important for us as a firm, for Salesforce Effectiveness Partners, but from the CRO or head of sales level, it's providing a co-pilot who can provide instant resources to be able to help them backfill specialists in areas where they're currently deployed with a series of generalists, and haven't yet had the luxury of being able to bring on more specialists to support that sales effort.
Mm-hmm. And like sales engineers are a really hot commodity that you don't see as many people pursuing it, but it is a well-paid, really in-demand job, especially in infrastructure, and hard to hire. Rick, what about in the difference when you're trying to go to the European market or markets?
I would say, I would agree with everything that Greg says, and it's even more important when you go abroad, because if you're kind of building that team and that planning and that focus in your home market, in people or in one office, or at least remote within the US, it's easier to have visibility on what's working well and what's working not well, on the kinds of verticals that you're talking to, on client feedback. Then when you're putting a team in Europe or LATAM or in Asia, how do you build that team? What verticals do you go after? When do you know that this is working well or not? So similar to a mistake that we see of a founder hiring a CRO too early, we also see the same mistake of somebody hiring kind of a GM of Europe or a GM of Asia, because it takes 3 to 6 months, 12 months to hire this person. They want to build their own structure that they're familiar with, and that may or may not be the structure that's really working for you in the home market. So it's critical that you analyze what's really working well in your home market. So is that the product market fit? Is it working? Are those deals within that ideal customer profile closing faster than outside of it? So look at the metrics, and then do that planning for the new market, understanding which verticals that you want to go after. You have options. In Europe, there's 50 countries. So, if you were looking at this ideal customer profile, where do these customers live? Is it banking? Is it e-commerce? Is it telco? Great. So I see where there's a majority and how big that market is. Let's see where my competition is. So quite often, an American company might have, let's say, 5 competitors in the US. There could be 5 competitors in Europe. Maybe there's 10 in London because they've all decided to expand there first. And so if you're number 11 and you're calling on those same customers, it's going to be really hard to be successful. Or if you're really an innovative company and you have a leading product and you're the first one there, then London's a great place to go. So map out all those different elements of the types of customers, the competition, how are you going to build the team, and then start with the lead generation, the digital marketing, the sales team. At the beginning, you can plug them into your US sales management, maybe with some European support or advice or oversight of that team. And then once you've kind of proven the market and you're understanding what's working and what's not working, there's always going to be fine tuning of that product market fit. It's not going to be exactly the same product market fit in North America. And maybe Germany is going to be different from Spain or Italy. So there's going to be nuances within the countries themselves. So once you get that right and the team is being built and the revenue is coming in, then you can put a manager on top. You also know where the business is coming from. So you know where to hire that manager to be able to grow that business. So I would reflect everything that Greg was saying is even more important when you expand to new markets.
Okay. And as a final question, we have one from the audience. So thank you, audience. Always makes my job easier. As founders, where do you focus your time at different stages of growth? What advice do you have for early entrepreneurs? Open up question to the floor.
Early entrepreneurs. I guess the first advice I would say is, you're an entrepreneur and you're a salesperson, right? From day one. Sometimes people think, oh, I don't sell, I'm above that. But you're a salesperson. You're selling your idea, you're selling your company, and the sooner you can crystallize that message of who you are and what you're trying to do and what you're not, then it's easier for you to get that message across, and it's easier for you to start growing your ecosystem, and that ecosystem telling other people what you do and how to help. So the simpler that message is, and the more you're promoting it, and as you said earlier, build that CRM early, capture all those contacts, because those contacts will be critical as you build your ecosystem and your client base from years in the future. So everybody you're meeting today, every card that you get, put them in that CRM, start marketing, start doing early newsletters or sharing how your company is advancing to that base, and really grow that concept. There's nothing about, oh, it's such a great idea, I'm not sharing it with anybody. You got to share it with everybody, so crystallize the message, promote it, and get those early customer wins through yourself, through your own network, get revenue in, get people buying into it, and then grow the business.
And they can't just use LinkedIn for this. They need a CRM. Like, you can't just use that.
Yeah, clearly you need some sort of a CRM to be able to grab that and then communicate out to that base.
Okay. Right?
My advice to the founder would be hire people that you philosophically connect with, that you trust, and that have track records, and then trust them to do their job and stay a little bit out of the weeds, stay out of the way. The common complaint I have from the first VP of sales, the first chief revenue officer, the first professional sales person that goes into founder-led organizations is the founders they're constantly selling their ideas to the founder, which is slowing things down before they're able to actually implement the things that they already know how to do. And so the founder needs to ride in on the white horse and facilitate, helping to close deals and, staying above the fray. But, hire the sales professionals, and this isn't unique to sales. This is other areas of the organization. I'm just speaking to the salesperson. Hire somebody that you really trust, and then trust them to build the infrastructure and to do the tactical things necessary to be able to scale the organization. That means don't just hire somebody because they're well qualified for the job. Interview the crap out of people so that you make sure not only are they well qualified for the job, but they match philosophically what you want to do and the way you see the world. Because if those two things come together, it's going to be a whole lot easier for you to be able to let go and let the sales professional do what they need to do without constantly wasting time and spinning cycles on having to sell, the founder before they can actually implement any of their ideas.
And I'd add to that, every conversation you have, especially at those early stage, is an opportunity to learn, whether it's interviewing someone who you have no chance of hiring or that you're really shooting up high, but you can learn so much from them. That usually the people you're interviewing for a job, unless it's to replace you, know way more than you do about the market or about something. So use as a chance to learn. And especially the reason founder-led sales is essential at the beginning is because you have to be good about selling your product, because that's how you find out where your product's going and the direction you need and what people actually like about it, not what you like about it, because you will have things you like about a technical product that no one gives any F's about. And then you're going to have to sell it to the funders. You want VC money, you want angel investors. You got to be willing to sell what they want to hear, and you got to hear what they're looking for in people. So it is getting down to the Socratic method, which has been 2,000 years and people have not mastered it. So it's about asking questions and listening. So thank you very much for your question. Thank you. Good luck in your founders. And thank you both so much for taking the time with us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
For joining.
Appreciate that.
Okay.